Hi there, I'm Brandy Horton, Vice President of Communications at Rails to Trails Conservancy. It is my honor and privilege today to be joined by Governor Jay Inslee, who is being celebrated as the 2023 Doppelt Family Rail Trail Champion. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The Rail Trail Champion recognition is bestowed by Rails to Trails Conservancy annually to celebrate those who go above and beyond for the rail trail movement through their work, their volunteerism, and their support. Your leadership, Governor, first as a state legislator, then in Congress, and now in your role in the governor's office, has helped facilitate the connectivity of trails and active transportation within Washington's communities, across the entire state, and ultimately across the entire nation. You have raised the expectations for future state leadership, proving that investments in trails are fundamental. You've helped to showcase the economic and quality of life benefits that a world-class trail system can uniquely deliver, demonstrating that this infrastructure is essential to healthy, thriving communities and to the well-being of people, places, and the planet. In your career, you have long upheld the benefits of trails, and you've championed investments in this infrastructure back to your time in the state legislature. I'm curious, just to kick us off, where does your enthusiasm for trails and your commitment to outdoor recreation and active transportation come from?
That is a big question. And there's so many answers to that. Intellectually, I would say that this is clean energy, right? You're on your bicycle, you're walking, you're not putting out carbon pollution that's going to destroy the planet through climate change. From a cost benefit analysis, it's a very inexpensive way to get to where you want to go. From a health perspective, it helps maintain our health and our well-being so we can enjoy our loved ones for prolonged periods of time. So there's all these intellectual reasons for believing that rails to trails are, the secret to societal success. I look at it, it's just pure fun. I just get right down in the visceral, man, it's fun. When I'm on a trail on my bike, I'm 10 years old again. It's like a time machine. That bicycle on a trail is a time machine. It takes you back. Last night I was on a trail at Bainbridge Island, just going through the woods, and I was actually thinking about I'm having as much fun as I did in 1961 when I was 10. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I just love seeing people on trails because you I don't think any time I can think of seeing people on trails, they're not smiling. Grandparents out walking with their kids. A few days ago, I saw a woman in an electric wheelchair on this nice trail that got access to a beach on Bainbridge Island where I live, where everybody can participate. She had three of her younger friends with her, and they were just having a grand time. And I just thought, this is so wonderful that we built a trail that's accessible to her, where she can get down and see the beach. So, a lot of intellectual reasons, but mostly just pure fun.
I love that. And we say all the time at Rails to Trails Conservancy how lucky we are to have a mission that delivers so much impact, but is joyful.
Yeah,
There's so much joy.
That is the right language for Rails to Trails, joyful. I think that should be the mantra for your enterprise.
It is. And, you share the story of the woman in the electric wheelchair and the accessibility of this infrastructure and the ability to create opportunities for people to get outside, I think is just so fundamental. And, it's part of what has inspired us in a lot of our work as well. And when we go back to just a couple of years in 2018, Rails to Trails Conservancy was exploring the idea of the Great American Rail Trail, which is the cross-country route. It'll be the first multi-use trail across the country, Washington, D.C. to Washington State. And you were the very first governor to stand up in support of this big vision. And that really helped us in so many ways, get other people on board across the country, get people excited about this, to have your leadership. What inspired you to get involved in that project?
Well, something like this is a motivator and an inspirational, something that people can point to. And when you believe yourself connected to a larger enterprise or a larger dream, it inspires you to take more local action. And I think that when a community can look, I can do this 2-mile section that's connected to a national asset, it inspires more people to get involved. That was the principal reason, and that has worked. We did the Beverly Bridge to be able to cross the Columbia River, which is an incredible achievement to cross the Columbia River on a trail, a dedicated trail. to bike and ped, and so having that connection to a larger vision is get people's juices flowing, and I think it has had an impact. And it's fun too. I was riding on the cross state trail here last November, I guess it was, with my grandkids. And for them, when I told them, we went to the dedication of the Beverly Bridge, and then we went up to Ellensburg, spent the night in a caboose. And when they were excited to ride on what is the cross country trail, they could see they're part of this cross national effort. Now, we didn't go as far as I'd like, though, because it started snowing, and Grandpa forgot to bring gloves for the kids. So it wasn't that long, but it was fun.
That is great. And I love, you have a quote from the opening of the Beverly Bridge where you said, "There is no Eastern Washington, there is no Western Washington, there is one Washington." And that message of how trails can bring that physical connection, but also that spiritual, that interpersonal connection is really meaningful. And when you're out on the trail, it really is one shared lived experience, for everyone out there. There's smiling, there's waving. We kind of put all the other stuff behind us, and we're together in that space. And when we look at civic action, when we look at how we get things done in communities, that togetherness matters so much. And I just love that quote from you.
And this is becoming more important, to have personal connections. We live in this internet dominated age where people are not having connections.
That's right.
And it's just such a great place to connect on a trail, because you mix with people you never sort of intentionally mixed with. It's just whoever you happen to bump into. And somebody's looking at a bird and you can ask to borrow their binocs. And, the woman in the chair I met the other day. And these are accidental interactions with people you normally may not know. So in the age of the internet, this is creating personal interaction, certainly a good thing.
It sure is. It sure is. And thinking about action and thinking about some of the advocacy that has happened in Washington state, it has really brought, over decades, there's been such powerful leadership, there's been such powerful advocacy and grassroots. There has become more focus on an intentionality toward efforts to connect trails, to connect that active transportation infrastructure. Yeah. Examples like the Great American that we've talked about, like the Leaf Line trails in King County. Why do you think that connectivity of the infrastructure matters? What do you think that long-term impact is of going from kind of that singular trail to the trail network?
Well, again, it comes back to this idea of when you're connected to larger purpose, it inspires you to greater effort. I've seen this. Now, this is kind of a family enterprise for me, too, because my son, Joe Inslee, is the community outreach people for the King County trail networks. So he gets to intertie, Kenmore with Renton. And he just says it's fun when you get two different groups working together to get that interchange. Both of them magnifies their effort within their communities. And so this is kind of a family affair with us in the Inslee household, not just Washington state. So it's just a way to magnify people's inspiration. That's how I think it works.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I love that your legacy will go beyond the infrastructure on the ground to what your children and what your grandchildren, the torches they pick up and carry.
Well, I'm not getting this award. I don't believe my son got to vote on this, so I don't think there was a fix. The fix was not in here, but
there was zero voting from the Inslee family. That's for sure. That's for sure. So one of the other things that you have done, I think, that is so important to showcase, and when we think about this award and why it matters so much, is that it shows people in other parts of the country what is possible, right? It shows them that when the governor picks up this issue, different things can happen, and there's different ways to kind of champion this infrastructure. You have leveraged the state's capital budget on different occasions to help fund critical pieces of infrastructure. And one of the things we talk about when we think about connectivity is that sometimes those are the hardest parts to fund. The Beverly Bridge is the perfect example. The T-Co Trestle. These are projects that people have wanted, that are so important to provide that connection, but they're expensive and they're hard to do, and it's hard to get all of the support. So what has motivated you to really push those hairy projects forward?
Well, in part, we should talk about the economic benefits of trails as well. We haven't talked about that today. Because we've been talking about joy and fun. But they're tremendous economic development projects. So I was with the mayor of Malden, Washington, and he's fairly in the neighborhood of the T-Co facility, but he was talking about finishing the last mile and a half of their trail. And Malden, Washington is a town that burned down a couple of years ago. The whole town burned down. So they're still rebuilding their town. And he was just telling me how exciting it was to get the next mile and a half to 2 miles of this trail from a tourism development. And also, it just makes his community a better place to live. So it brings more people moving back to the town. And they are rebuilding that town. It's actually pretty inspirational. But this is an economic development strategy for many communities, including rural and smaller towns, which certainly have not enjoyed the economic benefits of some of our boom times. So I don't discount that. And you mentioned our capital budget. We have done things in our capital budget, but I'm particularly pleased this year in our Move Ahead Washington program. We have $1.2 billion with a B for active transportation. And I'm proud of that achievement because these are serious dollars, because they recognize these are joyful, but they're part of our economic growth plans as well. They're part of our energy plans. We have to beat climate change, and these trails are one mechanism for beating climate change. It allows us to have denser communities where you can have commute on bicycles, and you're not burning diesel and gas at all, and you're being healthy. This is a win-win-win. So it's part of our climate, economic, and health-based approaches, and I'm glad that we've been able to put the dollars, real dollars in to make this happen. So if you want to see how investment pays off, come see us in Malden, Washington.
Oh, that's perfect. And I love that you said, with a B, $1 billion. And this is not a question. I just want to kind of pull on this thread a little bit. There's some work going on in the other Washington, in Washington, D.C., to try to unlock resources that would be focused on that connectivity piece. So right now, there's a lot of federal programs that channel resources to trails, walking, and biking. And all of those programs, there's strengths and there's challenges with those. But what's missing, and what we've really been working on in Congress, and what's missing is dedicated funding for the connectivity piece. Those are big projects. It would still be competitive, but those are big projects that could secure, extra additional dollars to do that. And I'm curious, just with that in mind, do you think that kind of a resource would be a benefit?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, definitely. And the reason is, connectivity, you don't want to say it's the orphan, but if you have community A and community B, they first think about their little communities, right? But they magnify their benefit if they become connected. So having a larger enterprise, i.e. the federal government, help on the connectivity part. Obviously, our state is doing the same thing to come in to really connect those smaller communities. It can be really magic getting work done.
That level of investment is what's needed. And it's incredible that Washington is putting that investment in, and not every state can. And so I think looking at how we can take the models of what's working, help to fill in the gaps that exist, both in terms of available funding and where that infrastructure goes. That's what it takes to really maximize the impact.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you. You've recently announced that you're not going to seek re-election. So as you look ahead to what's next, and you've talked about climate being a big focus, where do trails, walking, and biking fit into that vision for you?
Well, I hope it's going to allow more personally with my grandkids to ride more. And I don't know what I'll be doing after the governor's gig, but I will be working on clean energy development, which involves trails, because that is a critical element of decarbonizing our economy. So in some fashion, I hope to continue some professional endeavors in some fashion to try to decarbonize our economy. And trails are perfect in that regard. By the way, the electric bike phenomena here is just going bananas here too. The number of people who are getting on electric bikes is just crazy, which opens up whole new avenues. And we know it's possible. We know in Copenhagen, 34% of all their commutes are on bikes, rain or shine. We know that that's in the realm of the possible. And the integration of trails with larger enterprises. So I live on an island, and I see, dozens of bikes ride on that ferry boat and then go to the mainland and ride. And so we really want to integrate trails with other mechanisms of transportation as well. That's where the connectivity piece, I think, is really important. To integrate so you can ride, 4 miles, put your bike on a bus, go the next X. Integrating those systems is really important in maximizing people's alternatives here. So one way or another, I'm going to stay active, but hopefully get a few more miles on my bike too.
And that sounds perfect. And with that, I just thank you so much for your time and for your leadership, Governor, and everything you've done to make trails part of the conversation on climate, on economic development, and really on the well-being of people, places, and the planet.